Hello, how are we doing? Today is Sunday, and on Monday tomorrow, we're going to hear from Rachel Reeves about this £20 billion black hole in public finances. We covered this on Friday on the channel. In this video, I want to kind of just delve a little bit into some of the things that they're suggesting will be introduced as a byproduct of this to fix this problem. And in doing so, I also want to point out maybe some of the double standards that I feel that exist in society right now. Because when I go through the measures that they're proposing, it infuriated me a little bit. And I don't want to make this a video where you feel pissed off at what they'll be looking to perhaps introduce. But I think at the same time, if we're going to have an honest conversation about this, we also do need to point out where there are double standards. And there are huge double standards in what I'm seeing right now. And so, look, I want to educate as much as I possibly can and also update you with the news. So let's just dive into what we currently know, because tomorrow's going to be a big day. And also next week, I believe on Tuesday, we're going to hear from the Bank of England around what's going to happen with the Bank of England base rate. Are we going to see reductions in that? The consensus is there will be, I think there's 63 or 65% chance that we're going to see a reduction in the Bank of England base rate next week. That will be another conversation that we'll cover later on in the week. I'm going to be out filming on Monday, but we can talk about Bank of England separately. This one, though, is a bit of a doozy. So let's jump straight into what we already know. So just to recap, we know that there is a £20 billion black hole in public finances. And that is the big thing that needs to essentially be fixed. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to share my screen with you. And I just want to pose a very simple question in showing you this article right here. All right. So Chancellor Rachel Reeves pledges to fix economy as experts say black hole matches Tory tax cuts. I want you to pay attention to that. It matches the Tory tax cuts. The tax cuts that we're referring to here are the national insurance contributions tax cuts that Jeremy Hunt put in. So if you remember, over the course of two budgets, he introduced a 2p reduction to the national insurance tax bracket rate, which put essentially, on average, £900 in the pocket of an average household. The black hole matches that number, that measure specifically. And they talk about it a little bit in this article right here. And this is something that I read in this article, which kind of made me laugh. She goes, I've been honest during the election campaign that in the last 3 weeks, about the scale of the inheritance this government would have to pick up, she said. Now, unless I missed it, I don't recall the election campaign being anything about the true economic problems that we face as a country. Maybe I missed it. I don't know. Maybe you can correct me in the comment section. But here's the doozy. Meanwhile, Paul Johnson, head of the Independent Institute for Fiscal Studies, told Sky News that the £20 billion gap was almost exactly the cost of the national insurance cuts that Jeremy Hunt introduced this year, which was national insurance contributions. Now, here's the question I want to pose, and I'd love to hear from you in the comment section right here. And maybe this is thinking about things from a very simpleton's point of view. But if the whole in public finances is £20 billion, and we've identified that that exact whole is the national insurance contribution tax cuts that Jeremy Hunt brought in, the former chancellor brought in, then surely it would make more sense to basically just rescind those tax cuts. And yes, they promised there will be no tax increases or anything like that, but rescinding them and bringing us back to where we were, I think most people would be able to deal with, right? Because it was seemingly a small amount, £900 a year. Yes, it will help, but does it go that far? It's something that we were given that maybe we could have coped without, right? So surely just going back to the default position where we were before those tax cuts were introduced would be a good fix. And that fixes the black hole. Now, clearly, that's just the black hole. In order to fix the NHS, in order to fix public services and spending, yes, they need to have a look at efficiencies, but they also need to raise more money, right? We spoke about this on Friday. So surely, just going back to default on national insurance contributions would be the right fit. But that's not really what is being planned. Now, I think it's really important just to highlight this article right here. So this is what they're actually looking to do. So this is from the Express, and this was published 3 days ago. So this was published on Thursday, I want to say. Warning as Labour plots inheritance tax hike to 54.4% in double death tax rate. Now, double death tax rate. What does that mean? I'm going to jump into that, but just for a minute, and this is why I'm going to call out the double standard, and you tell me whether you agree with me in the comment section or not. I'm going to call out the double standard here. Inheritance tax, if you passed assets down to your loved ones once you're gone, currently they pay 40% on the value of your estate over a certain amount, because you have things like your nil rates residence allowance, was it nil rate band allowance, and you got your residency allowance as well. So it's £1,000,000 for a married couple, £500,000 for a single person. Anything above that, you're going to pay tax on 40%. Here's something I just want to show you, because there was a very popular death about a year ago. And you'll remember this because the country, is it a year ago? It feels like longer than a year ago now. When did the Queen pass away? Probably 2 years ago now, right? But you'll probably recall that the country stood still and we had the new king. So look at this. King Charles will not pay tax on inheritance from the Queen. Monarchy is exempt under the 1993 agreement, but Charles will pay income tax as his mother did. So income tax, fantastic. Great news. But when you think about how much inheritance, how much wealth was passed down to Charles, here it is right here. 15.2 billion in assets. 15.2 billion in assets. Now, I'm not going to count in the exemptions, the allowances, but let me just do rough numbers. At 40%, he would have had to have paid £6.08 billion in inheritance tax. But what did he do? He paid zero. Just like the Duke of Westminster when he inherited his dad's estate. Zero. And now, going back to this article, what they're looking to do is to increase inheritance tax from 40% to 54.4%. You can argue the majority is going to be on ordinary people who have worked really hard during their career to acquire an estate, to be able to pass on to their loved ones, to give them the leg up in life moving forward. This is going to be hugely contentious because it depends on how you come at this topic, right? If you're coming at this from a low-income background, you may say, well, actually, yes, if people have been able to manage to get an estate over £1 million, they should pay tax. That's not what I'm saying. They should definitely pay tax, okay? But it seems to me that there are different rules for different people. And this is where the conversation around the wealth tax comes in. If you have assets of over £1 million, do you introduce some kind of tiered tax bracket, perhaps? Where if you have assets between 1 and 5 million, you pay a certain amount, 5 to 10 million, you pay a certain amount, 10 to 25 million, you pay a certain amount. Should it be tiered and should it be incremental through those tiers? I think that's a debate that we absolutely need to have as a nation, because normal people and don't get this twisted, if you own a property in London right now, your property is likely going to put you into this environment where you will have to pay inheritance tax. You will qualify to pay inheritance tax. And so it's not just wealthy people that are doing this. People may have assets. They may be asset rich, cash poor. They're going to be pulled into this. Now, I've worked in the industry for some time. I've seen instances where parent dies, leaves property to the kids. And unfortunately, HMRC want their money within 90 days of death, typically. So if there is no cash lying around or there's been no planning put in place, what people often have to do is they have to sell the assets to pay HMRC, and then they divvy up whatever is left. What they're proposing with a 54.4% inheritance tax bill here is huge. And there's an example in this article which I'll walk you through. But let's just jump into some of the main details that I think are important. Now, like I've already said, you get a nil rate threshold. So you can have £325,000 in assets. So this could be investments, those kind of things, cash, assets, money that will be exempt. So what they're saying is they may think about cutting this a little bit. You also have the main residence nil rate band, which is £175,000. When you add 325 and 175, which is this number right here, And this number right here, that's £500,000. If you're married, times that by 2, that gives you £1 million. So you can pass on £1 million without paying any tax at all, any inheritance tax, right? Anything above, you pay 40% on. But what they're saying is they're going to increase that 40 to 54.4%, and this is how they're going to do it. Now, currently, people don't pay capital gains on death, only inheritance tax. Now she looks set to charge families for both, and this is where it's going to go from 40 to 54.4. So this is Chris Irvington, his private client partner at RSM. I think I know Chris actually, has done the sums and reckons this will lift HMRC to what we've already spoken about here. Now, what they're basically saying is on death, effectively, you're paying the inheritance tax on the value over the threshold, right? £1 million, 40%. But that didn't include capital gains. So now what they're basically saying is that what they will now do is they will charge capital gains tax on top of the inheritance tax to bring it up to that 54%. And let me just go straight to the example that Chris has done here. So in this example, he says here, right, if you own a rental property with a net value and capital gain of £100,000, right? So currently, high rate taxpayers will pay 24% on capital gains on property. So this could trigger a liability of £24,000. It's saying that the remaining £76,000 might then be subject to IHT at a rate of 40%, raising a further tax liability of up to £30,400. So with the combination of the two, where currently at this point in time you would only pay, roughly around about £30,400, the combined of it will mean that you're going to pay £54,400 on a net asset value of £100,000. Now, look, again, depending on how you come at this and from what walk of life you come at this, you'll be thinking, well, hang on a second, yes, if you've got a net asset value of £100,000, that's a lot of money, especially if you don't have it. You should absolutely pay the tax. I'm not, again, debating whether or not we should or should not pay this tax. But if you do get to the point where you don't get to these levels, you don't get to acquire properties by lack of hard work and effort. You have to work hard to acquire this. So what makes it worthwhile now if you've got to pay CGT and inheritance tax, and ultimately the government takes over half of what you've spent your life trying to accumulate? I just don't see the incentive for people to want to create wealth in the future. And they've already spoken about the fact that they are going to start closing loopholes where you can't use things like offshore trusts anymore within the inheritance tax planning regime. That's something that financial advisors are looking at right now in terms of, okay, so what are the alternatives? And I'm sure there will be alternatives that will come up. But it still begs the question of, does it become worthwhile? Do dreams become worthwhile pursuing? Especially if you're running your own business, building your own business, you've worked your socks off. Nothing's given lightly in this country. You got to fight for everything. So at what point does it become counterproductive to put that hard work in? I don't have the answer to this. I mean, just reading it and knowing people that I know, and having worked in the environment where you work with people like this, it's not going to go down well. That's one thing I can tell you right now. It is not going to go down well at all. And like I've already pointed out, I think there's a lot of double standard. How is it that the king can inherit 15.2 billion in assets but doesn't pay any inheritance tax? How is it that the Duke of Westminster can inherit a large, I can't remember what his estate was worth, but it was in the billions, and pay zero inheritance tax? Why does it feel like there is a different rule for the elite and then a different rule for everyone else? And if the neutral position to get back to, okay, public services don't have this 20 billion black hole, reverse national insurance contribution cuts that Jeremy Hunt introduced, do that. But I understand that obviously it's a much larger picture. We need to fund NHS, teachers, public services. I know we need to fund that. Is this the right way to do it, though? I think we're going to be in for a whole raft of tax raids. And we're going to have to wait and see. But look, I just want to stress this again. These are all suggestions at this point in time. I think if they've reached the media to a certain extent, they will have sources that will kind of know what's going to happen. It will be interesting to see what actually gets announced. I think we're going to have to wait until the autumn budget for this, though, ultimately, because I doubt that she's going to announce anything or, you know, allude to anything tomorrow in her speech. But I think this is foreshadowing what is going to come, and the difficult choices that they're going to face. And ultimately, we as the people in this country are going to have to bear the brunt of those choices, because the money has to come from us, the working people. And it's just, I feel like many people feel like this is a kick in the teeth. And look, I'm not saying that this is Labour's fault specifically. I think any government, any party that won the election would have had to deal with these issues. But it just feels like we're constantly in this cycle, right? Where parties get in, they do whatever they want to do, and nobody feels better off. And now we have to have the real conversation of, okay, so are you really in control of your finances? Are you doing the right things with your finances? Are you mentally and practically prepared to structure your finances to give you the best chance of success? Because if the squeeze is coming, you need to be more efficient. We talk about the government need to be more efficient with their spending. We need to be more efficient with our spending on a personal level. But there's only so much efficiency you can introduce before you start to have the really uncomfortable question that you need to go out and find more work, earn more money in order to stand still. And that is unpalatable for many people. I still believe that civil service people should never have to think about a side hustle, ever. Why is it when you're in a core job that society needs, teachers, doctors, policemen, fire officers, right? You're doing the real important work to keep society running, that you can't make ends meet. You've got to use food banks. You have to start thinking about how you get a second job or a third job or a side hustle. You should never be in that position. But this is the situation in which we find ourselves. And can we ever fix this? I hope we can. I hope that, look, I would be happy for the pain to be enforced for a 5-year period if we know that this is going to be better after this next parliament. But honestly, I don't feel as though it will. I feel like in 5 years' time, we'll be in exactly the same position. We'll be in the election campaign talking about the exact same issues and how Labour have now failed and raised the national debt even further and nothing's changed. That's my biggest fear. Maybe I'm alone in that feeling, maybe I'm not, but I'd love to know what you think in the comments. But it's going to be a big week for sure. So look, I'll keep you updated with some commentary into my thoughts and my take on things. But look, let me know what you think in the comments. And as always, make sure that you're able to control your controllables and do what you need to do to keep yourself safe and afloat. Thanks for watching. Cheers.